My name is Evelyn, and I'm 32. I'm sitting in my quiet Ohio apartment staring at a bank statement that says zero. My husband Nathan drained our accounts and left me with nothing but a note on the back of our wedding photo. "Good luck, Eve," it read in his sharp, cruel handwriting. 8 years of trust gone. But something happened in that courtroom, something he never saw coming. A secret that changed everything. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you loved? Stick around to hear what happened and maybe hit that subscribe button. Where are you watching from? 3 days after Nathan's note, I stood in line at our small-town bank clutching my purse like it could anchor me. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and the air smelled faintly of coffee and paper. My rent was due, and I needed to pull cash from our joint account. I kept replaying Nathan's last words in my head, his voice cool and final. "I'm done." I thought maybe he'd taken a few thousand, but we'd built a life together. There had to be something left. The teller, Sheila, a woman with kind eyes and graying hair, greeted me with a smile that faltered when she saw my name. "Evelyn, right?" She asked, her fingers hesitating on the keyboard. I nodded, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach. She typed for what felt like forever, her brow furrowing deeper with each click. Finally, she leaned forward, her voice low. "Evelyn, I'm so sorry, but your accounts, they're empty. Empty." The word hit me like a slap. I blinked, waiting for her to correct herself, but she slid a transaction record across the counter. My hands shook as I picked it up. Rows of numbers stared back at me, showing transfers to an offshore account I'd never heard of. All dated 2 days ago, the day Nathan left. $50,000 gone. Our savings, our emergency fund, every penny we'd scraped together over 8 years. My throat tightened and I felt the room tilt. Sheila's voice softened. I checked twice. He moved it all. Her pity made it worse. I mumbled something about needing air and stumbled to my car, the transaction record crumpled in my fist. Sitting in the driver's seat, I stared at the bank's brick facade, trying to piece it together. Nathan had always handled our finances. He said it was easier that way, that he was good with numbers. I trusted him. And now I was broke. I drove home in a daze, the radio off, the silence heavy. My apartment felt smaller than ever, the walls closing in as I sank onto the couch. I kept seeing Nathan's face, that cold smile he gave me when he walked out. Had he been planning this all along? The late-night phone calls, the way he'd snap his laptop shut when I entered the room, clues I'd ignored. I felt like a fool, but I needed answers. I grabbed his old laptop from the closet, the one he'd left behind. It was a long shot, but maybe there was anything to explain this. The screen flickered to life, and I started digging through folders. Most were empty, but one caught my eye. New start. My heart sank as I clicked it open. Inside were plane tickets to Paris, dated for next week. 2 tickets, one for Nathan, and one for someone named Jocelyn. Jocelyn. The name burned in my chest. Who was she? I scoured the folder, but there was nothing else. No photos, no emails, just those tickets. My mind raced, picturing Nathan laughing with some stranger, spending our money in a city we dreamed of visiting together. I slammed the laptop shut, my breath ragged. I wanted to scream, to call him and demand answers, but I knew he'd just laugh. He always had a way of twisting things, making me feel small. I picked up my phone and dialed Sadie, my best friend. She answered on the second ring, her voice warm but cautious. "Evie, you okay?" I told her everything, the bank, the tickets, Jocelyn. She listened quietly, then sighed. "You need a lawyer," she said. "Nathan's charming and he'll play that card in court. Don't let him walk all over you." Her words were practical, but they stung. Did she think I was too weak to fight him? I hung up, promising to call her later, but I felt more alone than ever. I sat there staring at the transaction record on the coffee table, the reality sinking in. Nathan hadn't just left me, he'd stolen my life. And now he was starting over with someone else while I was stuck here scrambling to survive. My anger flared hot and sharp, but beneath it was something heavier, fear. How was I supposed to fight this? I didn't even know where to start. I paced my apartment, the floor creaking under my steps. the transaction record still glaring at me from the coffee table. My anger was a live wire sparking with every thought of Nathan and this Jocelyn. I needed to hear his voice to make him admit what he'd done. I grabbed my phone and dialed his number, my heart pounding. It rang twice before he picked up, his tone slick and unbothered. "Evelyn, what's this about?" he asked, like I was interrupting his day. "You took everything I said," my voice shaking but firm. "Our savings, our life. Who's Jocelyn?" There was a pause, then a low chuckle that made my skin crawl. "You'll figure it out, Eve," he said. "You always do." I wanted to scream, but he cut me off. "Look, I'm busy. Good luck." The line went dead and I stood there gripping the phone so hard my knuckles whitened. His laugh echoed in my head, that same smug sound he'd used when he'd talk me out of asking questions about late nights or locked drawers. I sank onto the couch, my eyes landing on a framed photo of us at a county fair, my smile wide, his guarded. How had I missed it? I pulled the frame apart, hoping for something, a note, a clue, but found only dust. I tossed it into a box, my chest tight with a mix of rage and shame. I needed to know more to understand how deep this went. I rummaged through a drawer and found our old address book, flipping to the number for the bank. Maybe Sheila could tell me more. When I called, her voice was hesitant but warm. "Evelyn, I shouldn't say this," she whispered, "but I saw Nathan a few weeks ago at the diner on Maple. He was with a woman, tall, dark hair. They looked close." I thanked her, my stomach churning, and hung up. The diner. I knew it well. Greasy burgers, sticky booths, the place we'd gone for late-night fries when we were still in love. The thought of Nathan there with someone else laughing while I paid our bills made my hands tremble. I grabbed my keys and drove over, not sure what I was looking for. The diner was half empty, the neon sign buzzing in the dusk. I slid into a booth, scanning the room. The waitress, a young woman with a name tag reading Callie, brought me a coffee I didn't ask for. "You okay?" she asked, her eyes lingering. I nodded, but my voice betrayed me. "Did you ever see a guy here, mid-30s, blonde, with a woman I described, Nathan?" my words tumbling out. Callie frowned, then nodded slowly. "Yeah, a couple times. He was with this fancy-looking woman, always whispering. Paid with a card that wasn't his name." My breath caught. "Not his name? Whose?" Callie shrugged. "Didn't catch it, but they tipped big, like they were showing off." I left the diner with more questions than answers, the coffee untouched. Back home, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the address book. Sadie's warning about Nathan's charm in court gnawed at me. I couldn't let him spin this, but I felt out of my depth. I opened his laptop again, this time checking the browser history. Most of it was cleared, but one link remained, a travel blog about Paris bookmarked a month ago. A photo of a couple on a bridge, their faces blurred, stared back at me. Was this his plan? To start over with my money, my dreams, I called Sadie again, needing her steadiness. She answered, her voice softer this time. "Evie, you sound wrecked." "What happened?" I told her about the call with Nathan, the diner, the bookmark. She sighed. "He's playing you even now. Get a lawyer, someone tough. I know you're hurt, but don't let him see it." Her words were a lifeline, but they also stung. Was I letting him win by feeling this much? I hung up and looked around my apartment, the walls bare where our photos used to hang. The reality was sinking in deeper. Nathan hadn't just taken our money, he'd taken my trust, my sense of safety. I thought of Sheila's whisper, Callie's frown, the way Nathan laughed like he'd already won. My fear was still there, but something else was growing sharp and unyielding. I wasn't going to let him walk away clean. Not this time. I woke up the next morning with a headache, the kind that feels like your skull's too tight. My kitchen table was a mess of papers, bills, the transaction record that cursed Paris. Bookmarks still open on Nathan's laptop. I hadn't slept much, his laugh from our phone call looping in my head. I needed to act, to stop spinning in circles. A lawyer was my next step, but first I had to face the world. I pulled on a jacket and headed to the coffee shop on Main Street, hoping caffeine would clear my fog. The shop was crowded, the air thick with cinnamon and chatter. I ordered a latte and found a corner table, trying to blend in. But as I waited, I caught snippets of conversation from a group nearby. Did you hear about Nathan? One woman said, her voice low but sharp. He's living it up with some rich girl now. Left his wife high and dry. My stomach twisted. I recognized her Marjorie, a neighbor who always had a knack for gossip. Another voice chimed in, pity dripping. Poor Evelyn. She must be humiliated. Humiliated. The word burned. I gripped my cup, the heat searing my palm, but I didn't let go. They didn't know I was here. Didn't know I was hearing every word. I wanted to stand up to tell them I wasn't just some pathetic victim, but my legs felt glued to the chair. Marjorie leaned in, her eyes gleaming. I saw them at the marina last week. He was talking about a yacht. A yacht? Can you believe it? The group laughed, and I felt like I was shrinking, disappearing into the wooden floor. I left the shop without touching my latte, their voices trailing me out the door. The cold air hit my face, but it didn't cool the anger boiling inside. A yacht with my money. I walked to my car, my steps heavy, and drove to the office of Nathan's lawyer, Malcolm, whose name was on the divorce papers I'd found in my mailbox that morning. The papers accused me of financial negligence, claiming I'd mismanaged our funds. The lie was so bold it almost made me laugh, but the weight of it crushed me instead. Malcolm's office was all glass and sharp edges, the kind of place that screamed money. His receptionist, a young woman with a tight smile, made me wait 20 minutes before ushering me in. Malcolm was in his 40s, slick in a tailored suit, his handshake too firm. Evelyn, he said, sitting back in his leather chair. Let's make this quick. I understand you're contesting the divorce terms. His tone was patronizing, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. I slid the transaction record across his desk. Nathan stole everything I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. This proves it. He can't just walk away. Malcolm barely glanced at the paper, his lips curling into a smirk that reminded me of Nathan. This doesn't change the facts, he said. You signed joint account agreements. Legally, he had every right. As for the negligence claim, well, your spending habits are questionable. He tapped a folder implying evidence I hadn't seen. I felt the air leave my lungs. Spending habits. I'd been the one clipping coupons, skipping dinners out to save for our future. I leaned forward, my voice low. You know that's a lie. He's manipulating you just like he did me. Malcolm raised an eyebrow, unfazed. My advice? Settle quietly. You don't want this dragged out in court. It won't look good for you. He stood, signaling the meeting was over. I left his office in a daze, the divorce papers clutched to my chest. The accusation of negligence wasn't just a legal jab, it was personal, designed to make me doubt myself. I drove home, my mind racing. Had Nathan planned this far enough to fake evidence? The thought made me sick. I pulled into my parking lot, but instead of going inside, I sat in my car staring at the dashboard. The gossip, Malcolm's smirk, Nathan's laugh. They were all pieces of the same puzzle, and I was still missing the picture. Felicity's voicemail replayed in my mind, each word a fresh cut. Nathan bragging at a family barbecue, painting me as the one unraveling while he played the victor. I hadn't been invited to that gathering, hadn't even known it happened. The exclusion stung, a reminder of how distant my family had grown. I stood in my kitchen, the divorce papers scattered on the counter, and felt the weight of being erased not just by Nathan, but by everyone who was supposed to care. I sank into a chair, my fingers tracing the edge of a bill I couldn't pay. The apartment was too quiet, the kind of silence that amplifies every thought. I kept picturing Nathan at that barbecue, his easy smile charming our cousin's Felicity nodding along. Had she defended me at all, or just soaked up his lies? Our childhood flashed through my mind. Her always one step ahead, the golden daughter, while I scrambled to keep up. Now she was calling, but not to help, just to rub it in. I needed to know more to understand how deep this went. I grabbed a box from the hallway closet, one I'd avoided since Nathan left. It was stuffed with old keepsakes, cards, ticket stubs, photos from our early days. I dumped it onto the floor, searching for anything that might explain his betrayal. Near the bottom, I found a stack of bank statements, ones Nathan had insisted on keeping in hard copy. My heart raced as I flipped through them, noticing unfamiliar withdrawals, small at first, then larger, stretching back 2 years. One statement caught my eye. A loan application dated 6 months ago for $50,000. My name was on it, my signature scrawled at the bottom. But I'd never signed it. I stared at the looping letters so close to my own handwriting, but not quite right. He'd forged it, taken out a loan in my name, and now I was drowning in debt I didn't know existed. The room spun, and I gripped the table to steady myself. This wasn't just theft. It was a calculated trap, one he'd set long before he walked out. I shoved the papers aside and paced the room, my breath shallow. Every piece of my life with Nathan felt like a lie now. I thought of our late-night talks, how he'd hold my hand and promise we'd build a future together. Had any of it been real? I stopped at the bookshelf, my eyes landing on a leather-bound journal we'd used to write love notes in our first year. I opened it, hoping for some shred of truth, but the pages were filled with my words, not his. I'd poured my heart out while he'd given me nothing but vague one-liners. I flipped to the last entry, dated a year ago, where I'd written about our anniversary dinner. I'd been so happy, oblivious to his distance. Now I saw it clearly, the way he'd checked his phone, barely touched his food, excused himself to take a call. I slammed the journal shut, tears burning my eyes, and hurled it across the room. It hit the wall with a dull thud, pages splaying open. I didn't pick it up. I couldn't bear to read more. My phone buzzed, snapping me back. It was a text from Felicity. "Heard you're struggling. Let me know if you need advice." Advice. The audacity made my blood boil. She hadn't reached out when Nathan left, hadn't checked on me when I was sleeping on Sadie's couch because I couldn't afford heat. Now she was offering advice as if I was the one who'd failed. I typed a reply, my fingers shaking, "Leave me alone," but deleted it. She'd only twist it, make me the villain in her story. I sank onto the couch, the loan document crumpled in my hand. The gossip at the coffee shop, Malcolm's smug dismissal, Felicity's callous message, they were all proof of how thoroughly Nathan had rewritten our life. He'd turned me into a joke, a cautionary tale for the town to whisper about. I felt like I was suffocating, trapped in a version of myself I didn't recognize. And the worst part, I still didn't know how to fight back, not when every door seemed slammed shut. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and stale coffee, the kind of place where lives get carved up under fluorescent lights. I sat in the front row, my hands clasped so tight, my nails dug into my palms. It was the first hearing, and I felt like I was walking into a storm with no umbrella. My lawyer Rebecca sat beside me, her calm presence the only thing keeping me grounded. Across the room, Nathan lounged in his chair, his suit crisp, his smile sharp. He caught my eye and winked like this was all a game. The judge, a woman with steel gray hair and a no-nonsense stare, called the session to order. My stomach churned as Malcolm Nathan's lawyer stood to speak. His voice was smooth, practiced, laying out a story that made my life sound like a mess I'd created. Evelyn mismanaged their finances, he said, pulling out charts of supposed spending sprees I'd never taken. She neglected their accounts, leaving Nathan no choice but to secure his future. I wanted to scream. Every word was a lie, but the judge's pen scratched steadily, her face unreadable. Rebecca squeezed my hand under the table, her eyes steady. "Let him talk," she whispered. "We've got this." But I wasn't so sure. The room felt smaller with every accusation, the air thicker. I kept thinking of the forged loan, the empty accounts, the way Nathan had laughed on the phone. How was I supposed to fight this when he'd built a fortress of lies? I glanced at him, his posture relaxed like he'd already won. My chest tightened, a mix of rage and helplessness I couldn't shake. Malcolm finished smirking as he sat. The judge looked at Rebecca, her voice clipped. "Counselor, your response?" Rebecca stood, her movements deliberate, and I braced myself. She'd warned me this would be tough, that Nathan's team would try to bury me before we could present our case. But as she walked to the podium, she carried a folder I hadn't seen before, its edges worn like it had been tucked away for years. "Your Honor," Rebecca began, her voice clear and firm, "the narrative presented by Mr. Malcolm is not only misleading, but irrelevant in light of new evidence. She opened the folder, pulling out a single document, its paper yellowed but official. I represent Evelyn, who was unaware until recently of a substantial trust fund established by her late father valued at $200 million to be released on her 33rd birthday. A murmur rippled through the courtroom, and my heart stopped. $200 million. The number hit me like a freight train. I stared at Rebecca, my mind blank, waiting for her to laugh to say it was a mistake. But she kept talking, her words steady. This trust was deliberately concealed by her father to protect her from financial predators, men like Nathan, who systematically drained her accounts. She held up the document, and I caught a glimpse of my father's signature, bold and unmistakable. The room spun. My father, who died when I was 20, had never mentioned a trust fund. He'd been a quiet man, a mechanic who saved every penny or so, I thought. I remembered his late-night talks, his cryptic advice to wait for the right time. Had this been what he meant? My eyes darted to Nathan, and for the first time his smirk was gone. His face was pale, his hands gripping the table. The sight should have felt like victory, but I was too shocked to feel anything. The courtroom's buzz grew louder, a swarm of whispers that made my ears ring. Rebecca held up another paper, her voice cutting through the noise. This letter, written by Evelyn's father, details his intent to shield her from opportunists. It names Nathan specifically as a concern based on his behavior during their engagement. My breath caught. My father had seen through Nathan before I did. I pictured him at his workbench scribbling this warning, his hands stained with grease, his face heavy with worry. Why hadn't he told me? Rebecca handed the letter to the judge, who scanned it with a furrowed brow. I couldn't look at Nathan, but I felt his stare, a mix of panic and rage, boring into me. The crowd's murmurs turned to gasps as Rebecca continued. We've uncovered additional evidence of forgery, including a loan in Evelyn's name orchestrated by Nathan to fund his new life. She gestured to a stack of documents, each one a nail in the coffin of his lies. Malcolm shot to his feet, his face red. Objection. This is unsubstantiated hearsay. The trust fund's legitimacy hasn't been verified. His voice cracked, betraying his composure. Rebecca didn't flinch. The trust is managed by a reputable firm, and I have their affidavit here. She slid another paper across the bench, her calm infuriating Malcolm further. The judge raised a hand, silencing him, but the damage was done. The room was alive with speculation eyes darting between me and Nathan. I should have felt triumphant, but all I could think about was my father's letter. He'd known Nathan was trouble, had watched him charm his way into our family, and said nothing to my face. Instead, he'd locked away this fortune, leaving me to scrape by to marry a man who'd bleed me dry. The betrayal wasn't just Nathan's, it was my father's too, his silence a wound I hadn't expected. My hands trembled in my lap, the weight of $200 million feeling like a chain around my neck. Nathan's voice broke the chaos, sharp and desperate. "This is ridiculous," he shouted, standing without permission. She knew about the trust. She's playing the victim to scam me. The judge banged her gavel, but his words landed like a punch. Heads turned, and I felt their stares, townsfolk, reporters, even the bailiff judging me, wondering if I'd hidden this wealth all along. My throat tightened, and I wanted to disappear, to crawl out of my skin and vanish. Rebecca stepped forward, unfazed. "Your Honor, Nathan's outburst only confirms his pattern of deflection. We request a recess to present further evidence of his fraud." The judge nodded, her expression unreadable, and called a break. The room erupted, voices, overlapping cameras clicking as reporters scrambled for a shot. I stayed frozen, my heart pounding as Nathan stormed out, Malcolm trailing him. His accusation echoed in my head. She's playing the victim, twisting my pain into something ugly, something I'd done to myself. Rebecca touched my shoulder, her voice low. "You're doing great. Stay strong." But I didn't feel strong. I felt exposed, like my life had been ripped open for the world to gawk at. The trust fund, my father's letter, Nathan's lies. They were all real, but they didn't feel like mine. I was a stranger in my own story, caught in a spotlight I hadn't asked for. As the courtroom emptied, I sat alone, staring at the empty bench, my mind a tangle of shock and grief. How had it come to this? The courthouse steps were cold under my feet. As I walked out, the crowd's whispers fading behind me. Rebecca's hand rested lightly on my back, guiding me through the swarm of reporters shouting questions about the trust fund. I kept my head down, my heart still racing from Nathan's outburst and the weight of my father's letter. I wasn't the victim he'd painted, and I was done letting him control the story. That night in my apartment, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to survive this, I was going to fight. The next morning, I sat in Rebecca's office, a small space cluttered with law books and framed degrees. She slid a business card across her desk. "Curtis, a private investigator," she said. "He's the best at digging up what people like Nathan hide." I nodded, my fingers tracing the card's edges. Hiring Curtis felt like crossing a line, like admitting this wasn't just a divorce but a war. But after Nathan's lies in court, I needed ammunition. Curtis's office was a stark contrast to Rebecca's bare walls, a single desk, and the faint smell of cigarette smoke. He was in his 50s, broad-shouldered, with a gruff voice and eyes that didn't miss a thing. "So your husband's a thief," he said, leaning back in his chair. "What do you want me to find?" I handed him the transaction record and the forged loan document, my voice steady. "Everything. His offshore accounts, this Jocelyn woman, anything he's hiding." Curtis raised an eyebrow, jotting notes. "This won't be cheap," he warned. I thought of the trust fund, still unreal to me, and said, "Do it." Back home, I felt a spark of control for the first time in weeks. I called Rebecca to push forward with freezing Nathan's assets. She explained the process, using the trust fund's legal weight to lock down anything he'd touched. "It's aggressive," she said, "but it'll hit him where it hurts." I agreed, picturing Nathan's smug face in court, how it had cracked when the trust was revealed. I wanted him to feel that again, to know he couldn't outrun me. That afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at a photo of my father I'd dug out from a drawer. He was smiling, his arm around me at my high school graduation, his eyes crinkled with pride. The letter Rebecca had shown in court was still a raw wound. Why hadn't he trusted me enough to tell me about the money? But I pushed the hurt aside. He'd left me this power, and I was going to use it. I wrote down every detail I could remember about Nathan's habits, his late-night calls, the locked briefcase he kept in our closet, the way he'd dodge questions about his business trips. My phone rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was Sadie, her voice tentative. "Evie. I saw the news about the trust fund. You okay?" I told her about Curtis, about the asset freeze. She hesitated, then said, "Just be careful. Nathan's slippery." Her caution irritated me, but I swallowed it. "I'm done being careful," I said. "He doesn't get to win this." She didn't argue, but I could hear her worry through the silence. I hung up and opened my laptop, pulling up the bank's online portal. The accounts were still empty, but I wasn't looking for money. I was searching for patterns, anything Nathan might have missed. A forgotten login led me to an old joint email account we'd used for bills. Most of it was junk, but one message stood out, a confirmation for a wire transfer to a name I didn't recognize, dated a week before he left. My pulse quickened. It wasn't much, but it was a thread to pull. I leaned back, the spark in my chest growing. Nathan had underestimated me, thought I'd crumble under his lies. But I was done playing his game. I was building my own, and this time I'd be the one calling the shots. The wire transfer email nagged at me, a loose thread I couldn't ignore. I forwarded it to Curtis, adding a note about Nathan's old briefcase, the one he'd always locked. I spent the next hour tearing through my apartment, checking drawers and coat pockets. Under a pile of old scarves, I found a small key, its metal cool against my palm. My hands shook as I fitted it into the briefcase's lock. It clicked open, revealing a notebook filled with Nathan's jagged handwriting. Pages listed dates, amounts, and cryptic initials, JMT. My stomach twisted as I recognized some figures matching the offshore transfers. One entry, dated a year ago, read, "E too trusting. Move slow. J knows the plan." J had to be Jocelyn. The betrayal wasn't new. It was a long game, and I'd been blind. But seeing his cold calculation in ink fueled something fierce in me. I snapped photos of every page and sent them to Curtis, my resolve hardening. I needed to confront the past, not just Nathan's, but mine. I called Felicity, my sister's number heavy in my hand. Our last talk had been a fight, her smug advice cutting deep, but she'd mentioned Nathan's contacts at the barbecue. I needed those names. She answered, her voice guarded. Evelyn, I didn't expect you. I cut to the chase. You said Nathan was bragging. Who was he with? She hesitated, then listed a few cousins and a guy named Trent, someone Nathan had been texting. I scribbled the name, ignoring her attempt to lecture me about moving on. The call left me raw. Felicity's tone a reminder of our fractured bond. I pushed it aside and focused on Trent. A quick search online showed he was a local realtor, flashy and connected. If Nathan was cozying up to him, there was a reason. I emailed Curtis again, asking him to track Trent's dealings with Nathan or Jocelyn. Each step I took felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, the woman Nathan thought he'd broken. That evening I met Dr. Nora, a therapist Rebecca recommended. Her office was warm with soft chairs and a faint lavender scent. I was skeptical, but I needed to untangle the mess in my head. I told her about the trust fund, Nathan's lies, my father's silence. She listened, her eyes kind but piercing. You've been carrying everyone else's choices, she said. What do you want for you? The question hit hard. I didn't know. But saying it out loud, admitting I'd lost myself, felt like a start. Nora asked me to write down one thing I could control. I thought of Nathan's notebook, the key I'd found, the names I was chasing. I'm taking him down, I wrote, my pen digging into the paper. Not for revenge, but because I deserve the truth. Nora nodded, her smile subtle. That's a beginning, she said. I left her office lighter, not healed, but grounded, like I'd planted a seed in soil I'd forgotten I owned. Back home, I stood in my living room, the briefcase open on the table, its contents a map of Nathan's deceit. I thought of Jocelyn, this shadow who'd helped him unravel my life. Curtis had texted earlier saying he'd found a lead, a casino where Nathan and Jocelyn had been spotted betting big. I imagined them there laughing, spending my money while I begged the bank for answers. The image didn't crush me this time. It sharpened my focus. I closed the briefcase and set it by the door, ready to hand over to Curtis. The apartment was quiet, but it didn't feel empty anymore. I walked to the mirror, meeting my own eyes. They were tired, but there was a fire in them, one Nathan hadn't snuffed out. I didn't say a word, didn't need to. The woman staring back was done waiting for permission to fight. She was already moving. The courtroom was quieter this time, the air heavy with anticipation. I sat beside Rebecca, my hands steady, despite the pulse hammering in my throat. Curtis's evidence, a thick folder of bank records, casino receipts, and texts between Nathan and Jocelyn, lay on the table, a weapon I'd helped forge. The judge's eyes flicked over the documents as Rebecca stood, her voice sharp. These prove Nathan and his accomplice Jocelyn orchestrated a deliberate fraud, she said. We request a full asset freeze and criminal charges. Nathan's face was stone, but his hands twitched, betraying him. Malcolm tried to object, stammering about chain of custody, but the judge cut him off. I'll review this, she said, her tone final. My chest loosened just a fraction. For the first time, Nathan wasn't in control. The hearing ended quickly, and as we left, I caught his eye. No wink, no smirk, just a blank stare, like he was seeing me for the first time. Outside, the spring air was crisp, but I felt a chill. Rebecca clapped my shoulder. You did this, Evelyn. You turned the tide. Her words should have lifted me, but I felt strangely hollow, like I'd won a battle but lost something else. I drove to my new apartment, a small place I'd rented with a loan from Sadie. It was bare, just a couch and a folding table, but it was mine. I sat on the floor, Curtis's photos spread out before me, Nathan and Jocelyn at a roulette table, their smiles greedy, my money fueling their game. My phone buzzed, a number I didn't know. It was Trent, the realtor, Felicity had mentioned. His voice was nervous, rushed. I heard you're digging into Nathan, he said. Look, I didn't know he was stealing. He said it was his money. I froze the phone tight against my ear. Trent rambled about a deal Nathan pitched, a condo in Paris funded by investments. I realized he meant my savings, my future. I thanked him and hung up my hands cold. Nathan hadn't just taken my money. He'd sold my dreams to strangers. I stood and walked to the window, staring at the street below. Kids rode bikes, their laughter faint through the glass. I envied their lightness, their trust. My victory in court felt real but distant, like a story I was reading, not living. I'd exposed Nathan, but the cost was staring me down. Years of love, faith, all turned to ash. I thought of Dr. Nora's question, "What do you want for you?" I still didn't have an answer, and that scared me more than Nathan's lies. Sadie called later, her voice bright. "Evie, the news is everywhere. You nailed him." I forced a smile she couldn't see. "Yeah, it's something I said." She pushed me to celebrate, but I begged off, claiming a headache. I wasn't ready for her cheer, not when I felt so unmoored. The evidence, the asset freeze, it was justice. But it didn't fill the hole Nathan left. I sat back on the floor, the casino photos staring up at me, and felt the weight of my own strength. It was mine, but it was heavy. I woke to a gray dawn, the kind that makes the world feel muted. My new apartment was still unfamiliar, the walls too plain, the silence too sharp. I hadn't looked at Curtis's photos again, but they lingered in my mind, a reminder of the life Nathan had stolen. I was due to meet Rebecca later to discuss the settlement, but first I had an unexpected visitor. A knock at my door startled me. Through the peephole I saw Felicity, her posture stiff, a paper bag in her hand. I opened the door, my guard up. She didn't smile, just held out the bag. "Pastries," she said. "Thought you might need them." Her voice was clipped, like she was fulfilling an obligation. I took the bag, the scent of cinnamon faint but warm, and let her in. We sat at my folding table, the space between us heavy. "I heard about court," she said finally, her eyes on her coffee mug. "You really got him." Her words weren't praise, more like an acknowledgement of something she couldn't ignore. I waited, sensing there was more. She shifted her fingers, tightening around the mug. "Nathan called me last night," she said. "Wanted me to talk you into settling. Said he's sorry, that he was desperate." My chest tightened, not with anger, but with a dull ache. "Sorry. After everything." He thought an apology through my sister would fix it. I looked at her, searching for the sister who'd once braided my hair, who'd shared secrets under blankets. "Did you tell him to go to hell?" I asked, my voice low. Felicity's eyes flicked away, and that was answer enough. I pushed my chair back, the scrape loud in the quiet. "You didn't," I said. "You listened to him." She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. "Don't. Just go." She stood, her face a mix of guilt and defiance, and left without another word. The pastry sat untouched as I drove to the courthouse. Rebecca was waiting, her briefcase open, papers neatly stacked. "The settlement's in motion," she said. "You'll get back what he stole, plus damages. It's a win." I nodded, but the victory felt hollow. Nathan's call to Felicity, her silence, it all proved how far his reach still was. Even now, he was trying to pull strings to make me doubt. Later, I walked through a park near my apartment, the grass damp from morning dew. Couples strolled. Kids chased each other, their lives untouched by the kind of betrayal I carried. I sat on a bench, pulling out a letter I'd found in my mailbox. A handwritten note from Nathan slipped through somehow. "I'm sorry, Eve," it read. I got in over my head. "Let's talk." No signature, just his familiar scrawl. I crumpled it, my hand steady, but my heart unsteady. I thought of Felicity's visit, her inability to stand up to him. I thought of the settlement, the money I'd soon have, the trust fund that still felt like a stranger's gift. It was all real, but it didn't erase the years I'd spent loving a man who'd planned my ruin. I tucked the letter into my pocket, not because I'd answer it, but because it was proof of who he was. I stared at the park, the world moving on without me, and felt a quiet ache settle in my bones. I'd won, but I was still alone. The morning sun spilled through my apartment window, painting soft stripes across the hardwood floor. I sat cross-legged on a rug I'd bought last week, a small act of making this place my own. The settlement papers were signed, Nathan's assets frozen, and the courtroom battles were behind me. But the quiet was new, unfamiliar, like a guest I wasn't sure how to welcome. I sipped tea from a chipped mug, the warmth grounding me, and let my thoughts wander not to Nathan, but to what came next. I'd started volunteering at a community center downtown, a place with creaky floors and mismatched chairs. They ran classes for women teaching budgeting job skills, things I'd learned the hard way. My first session was that afternoon, and I was nervous not about speaking, but about whether I had anything worth saying. I jotted notes on a pad, tips on spotting financial red flag stories of my own mistakes. Writing them felt like peeling back old scars, but it also felt right. I drove to the center, the radio off, the hum of the engine enough company. The parking lot was full of beat-up cars, a reminder of the lives being pieced together inside. I walked in, greeted by a woman named Carla, the coordinator, whose smile was all warmth. "You're Evelyn, right?" she said, shaking my hand. "We're lucky to have you." Her words caught me off guard, a small kindness I hadn't realized I needed. The classroom was small, 10 women seated in a circle, their faces a mix of curiosity and fatigue. I stood at the front, my notes clutched tight, and started talking. I shared how I'd trusted too much, how I'd ignored warning signs because I wanted to believe in love. Their nods, their quiet hums of agreement built a bridge between us. One woman, Maria, raised her hand. "How do you start over?" she asked, her voice soft but heavy. I paused, searching for an answer that wasn't just words. I told her about my new apartment, how empty it felt, but how I was learning to fill it with things I chose. I talked about the trust fund, not the number, but the weight of it, how it forced me to rethink who I was. The women listened, some jotting notes, others just watching me, their eyes reflecting stories I'd never know. I ended the session early, my voice hoarse, but I felt lighter, like I'd left a piece of my pain in that room. After I drove to a cemetery on the edge of town, a place I hadn't visited in years. My father's grave was under a maple tree, the stone simple, his name etched in clean lines. I knelt, brushing dirt from the edges, and pulled his letter from my pocket, the one Rebecca had shown in court. I read it again, his words careful but firm, warning me about men who take more than they give. I'd been angry at his silence, but now I saw his love in it, flawed but real. I spoke to him, my voice low, the breeze carrying my words. "You tried to protect me," I said. "I wish you'd told me, but I get it now." I folded the letter and tucked it back in my pocket, my fingers lingering on the paper. The cemetery was quiet, just the rustle of leaves and distant birds. I stood my shadow long across the grass and felt a stillness settle in me, not peace yet, but something close. I left the cemetery with a quiet resolve, the weight of my father's letter lighter in my pocket. The drive home took me past a small lake, its surface still under the afternoon sky. I pulled over on impulse, grabbing a notebook from my glove box. I'd started journaling after my sessions with Dr. Nora, a way to untangle thoughts I couldn't say aloud. I walked to the water's edge, the grass cool under my shoes, and sat on a flat rock, the notebook open in my lap. I wrote about the community center, how Maria's question had stayed with me. How do you start over? I hadn't answered her fully, but the truth was forming now. You start by choosing one thing, I wrote, one small thing that's yours, and you build from there. I thought of the rug in my apartment, the tea mug, the way I'd arranged my books on a shelf. They weren't much, but they were mine, pieces of a life I was claiming. The lake rippled as a breeze passed, and I remembered a summer here with Sadie years ago, before Nathan, before everything. We'd skipped stones laughing until our sides hurt. I picked up a pebble, smooth and gray, and tossed it into the water. It sank with a soft plop, the ripples spreading wide. I imagined letting go of Nathan's lies, my father's secrecy, Felicity's distance, each one a stone I didn't need to carry anymore. Back at the community center the next day, I ran into Sheila, the bank teller who'd first broken the news about my empty accounts. She was there for a class, her hands nervous around a notebook. "I didn't expect to see you teaching," she said, her smile shy. I told her I hadn't expected it either, but it felt like a way to make sense of things. She hesitated, then shared her own story. A husband who'd controlled her finances left her with nothing but apologies. I listened, the echo of my own pain in her words, and felt a bond form, fragile but real. That evening, Sadie threw a small party for my 33rd birthday, the day the trust fund would officially be mine. She'd decorated her backyard with string lights, the glow soft against the dusk. A few friends came, their faces kind, their laughter a reminder of life beyond the courtroom. Sadie handed me a glass of wine, her eyes bright. "You're different now," she said. "Stronger." I smiled, not sure I believed her, but wanting to. We toasted, the clink of glasses sharp in the quiet. I looked at the lights, the stars just starting to show, and thought of the lake, the pebble, the ripples. I wasn't whole yet, but I was moving step by step toward something new. I didn't need to be the woman I was before Nathan, or the one my father tried to protect. I just needed to be me here now, with a glass in my hand and a friend by my side. I slipped away from the party early, driving home under a sky full of stars. My apartment was dark, but I didn't turn on the light. I stood by the window, watching the street below, the world soft and still. My breath was slow, my heart steady. I wasn't running anymore, not from Nathan, not from myself. I was just here, and that was enough. My mornings now start with a walk through the neighborhood, the streets lined with old oaks and cracked sidewalks. I carry a thermos of coffee, the steam curling in the cool air, and listen to the world waking up, birds chirping, a dog barking in the distance. It's a routine I've built one step at a time to remind myself I'm here, not running, not hiding. The trust fund is mine now, a number so big, it still feels like someone else's life. But I'm learning to carry it to make it mean something. I've leased a small office downtown, a space with tall windows and creaky floors where I'm setting up a foundation. It's called Haven, a name I chose for women like me, women who've had their lives upended by betrayal. We'll offer legal aid, financial classes, a place to start over. I'm no expert, but I know what it's like to lose everything and keep going. Sheila, the bank teller, is helping me plan the first workshop. She's got a sharp mind for numbers and a story that mirrors mine, and her quiet strength pushes me to keep at it. Most days I work late sketching budgets or emailing advisors. The office is cluttered with notes and coffee mugs, but it feels alive, like a garden I'm tending. Last week I hung a map on the wall, pinning cities where we might expand: Chicago, Atlanta, maybe Seattle. It's ambitious, but for the first time I'm not afraid to dream big. I think of Maria from the community center, her question about starting over, and I want Haven to be an answer, not just for her, but for all of us. I've been meeting Felicity for coffee once a month, our talks cautious but growing warmer. She showed up last time with a photo from our childhood, both of us in pigtails grinning at a county fair. "I didn't know you kept this," I said, my voice catching. She shrugged, a little shy. "It's a good memory." We didn't hug or cry, but we sat longer than usual, letting the silence say what we couldn't. It's not perfect, but it's a start, and I'm learning that's enough. At home, I've started cooking again, simple things like pasta or roasted vegetables. I light a candle, play soft music, and eat at my table, not the couch. It's a small act, but it grounds me. Makes the apartment feel like a home, not just a place to sleep. I framed a photo of myself from last month standing outside the community center, my smile tired but real. I look at it when I doubt myself, a reminder of how far I've come. I don't think about Nathan much anymore. He's facing charges, his life unraveling in ways I don't need to watch. The anger's faded, replaced by a quiet clarity. I'm not the woman who loved him, not the one who broke under his lies. I'm just Evelyn, building something new one day at a time. I sit on my balcony tonight, the town lights twinkling below, and breathe in the cool air. It feels like a pause, a moment to just be before the work starts again. I spoke at Haven's first community event last week, a small gathering in a rented hall with folding chairs and a makeshift stage. The room was full, women of all ages, their eyes carrying stories. I recognized loss, resilience, hope. I stood at the podium, my hands steady, and told them about my journey, not as a victim or a millionaire, but as someone who'd learned to rebuild. I talked about the nights I'd doubted myself, the days I'd chosen to keep going. When I finished, the applause was soft but warm, and a woman in the back, her hair streaked with gray, gave me a nod that felt like understanding. That night I drove home under a sky heavy with clouds, the road quiet except for the hum of my tires. I thought about the woman's nod, the way it anchored me. I'd spent so long feeling like I had to prove something to Nathan, to Felicity, to the town. But standing in that hall, I realized I didn't need their approval. I needed my own. I'd found it not in the trust fund or the courtroom wins, but in the small choices, showing up, speaking out, building something that mattered. Sadie came over the next evening, bringing a bottle of cider and a deck of cards. We played on my balcony, the air cool, the town's lights a soft glow below. She won 3 hands in a row, laughing as I groaned. "You're too good at this," I said, and she grinned, her eyes crinkling. "You're just distracted, Evie." Thinking about that speech, I nodded, admitting how it had shifted something in me. She dealt another hand, her voice soft. "You're not just surviving anymore. You're living." Her words stayed with me long after she left. Living. It sounded simple, but it was everything. I'd spent years tethered to Nathan's lies, to my father's secrets, to my own fears. Letting go wasn't about forgiving them, it was about choosing myself. I started painting last month, nothing fancy, just watercolors on cheap paper. The colors bleed together, messy but alive, and I hang them on my fridge not for anyone else, but because they make me smile. It's a small thing, but it's mine. The lesson I carry now isn't about money or justice. It's about freedom, the kind you find when you stop waiting for someone else to save you. Pain cracks you open, shows you the raw edges of who you are. But those edges, they're where you grow. I'm not perfect, not healed, not some storybook hero. I'm Evelyn, flawed and steady, learning to trust my own steps. That's enough. What's a moment that broke you but taught you who you are? Share it below. I'd love to hear your story. If this resonated, maybe give it a like or subscribe to join me on this journey. Share it with someone who needs a reminder they're not alone. Thank you for listening, for being here. Here's to finding our way, one step at a time.